year ago, announced that we had to close DC General, and of course we do. It's a dilapidated den of people wasting their lives because they're not getting proper services, and it's really a den of hopelessness, I believe. In any case, her plan was and is to close DC General and take the families, it's a family shelter, take the families and distribute them in smaller shelters around the district in every ward. And so a few weeks ago, after that year-long something of a hiatus looking for different sites, the mayor announced, and it was the first time the council knew, or you knew, what the sites were. And after that, there was a meeting at the Metropolitan Church to answer some questions, but it was so soon after the announcement that many people weren't even aware and weren't able to come or what have you. So the reason why I've put together this meeting is because there have been further questions, of course, by folks about the proposed shelter here in Ward 3. And so I want to tell you first what the posture of things are in general. First, the mayor has sent over to the council a piece of legislation that has essentially three parts. Part one is for us to approve letters of intent as a package with the various developers or builders or what have you for each of the shelters. The second part is to essentially exempt the process from certain provisions of the Contracting and Procurement Act. And the third is to ask the council for a sense of council resolution to expedite any zoning action that needs to be taken for any particular site, and as part of that, to express the sense of the council that we support any changes in zoning that are necessary. Now, the reason why that's in the form of a sense of the council resolution is because under the Home Rule Act, the council has no role to play in zoning issues, except, adopting the comprehensive plan, but in particular cases. So what will happen is that legislation is going to be subject to a hearing in front of the council on March 17th at 10:30 in the council chamber. Anybody wishing to testify should contact Chairman Mendelson's office to get on the list, or if you want to submit testimony, that's fine too. So that's that. The chairman indicates that he would expect to bring the legislation to a vote in the middle of April, or at least he said that as early as yesterday, or as late as yesterday, I guess. So that's from the council perspective. Then, in addition, the mayor has announced that she plans to come back to the various communities in May. I'm not entirely sure when or where, but in May. Maybe Director Zeilinger has more information about that. And then, of course, as to any sites where there is a requirement for a variance or some change in the zoning, there has to be an application made to the Board of Zoning Adjustment, and then a hearing and an action by that body. When that happens will depend upon when an application is filed. My understanding is no application has been filed yet with respect to the Ward 3 site. So when that happens, then there'll be notice and opportunities to be heard. And prior to that, to be sure, there may be other community meetings and certainly ANC meetings about what their recommendations are with respect to that zoning change and to the project in general. So that's all before us sort of procedurally. But today, the reason why I invited folks from the executive branch today is for the executive branch to respond to your comments and questions about the site in Ward 3, because there are many questions that people have. And to sort of structure things a little bit, we have this room for 2 hours. So to structure things a little bit, I thought we could deal first with the question of how we got here, and then second, the question about what it is and where we're going with a project here in Ward 3. After each part, we can have questions, and we have a mic set up over to my right. And so what we'd like to do to have some, organization here is to have people line up who have questions and then put their questions. Now, I know there's a lot of intense feeling that may be surrounding this. So I want to ask, and I probably don't need to say this to you all, but I'm going to say it anyway. I want you to all think about how we behave in a civil manner, both to the people who we've invited, but also to each other. So, for example, if someone gets up and says something that you vehemently disagree with, please do not yell out. When it's your turn, you can say what your position is in response to something that somebody else says, okay? So I think that's the best way to do that. Now, I know some people could not come today. So what I've asked for the Council Channel 13 to record this event, so you will be on TV, to record this event so that people can see it, either if they have to leave early or some such thing, or they're not here at all, they can see it on Channel 13. We won't know exactly when it will be played. It takes a few days to sort of organize that, but that will be advertised on Channel 13. So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn the mic over to our guests from the executive branch, and we have with us, leading the panel, Director Laura Zeilinger. She heads the Department of Human Services, which has jurisdiction over this entire matter. Jonathan Kane from DGS, who heads the entire department that does the building and planning and that sort of thing. And Matt LeGrant, who's the administrator, the zoning administrator from DCRA. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to them and to you.
I want to provide some framing information and then move quickly to answering the questions. As I mentioned, people came here with many, many questions. There's a screen behind me where we'll also be providing a little bit of information. And some of you who have been were at the initial rollout announcement may have seen some of this information, but many folks I know were not able to make that initial meeting, so I thought it would be helpful to have some framing. As the council member said, I think one thing that everybody, or many people in our community agree on is that we need an alternative to DC General. And that everywhere I know I go throughout the community, and the mayor has been throughout the community. Yes. Hold the mic closer. Okay, will do. Thank you. And feel free to tell me again if you are having trouble hearing. And so we rolled out in February a strategy to accomplish that goal by creating short-term housing for families in all 8 wards of the District of Columbia. To give you a sense of what that means and what we're talking about, I think it's important to know what does family homelessness look like in the district, and who exactly are we talking about. So families who experience homelessness in the district, and we're talking about programs. We have a strategy called Homeward DC, which is about ending homelessness for all populations. Our conversation today is about the important fixes that are needed to our family system. So when we talk about families, we mean adults who are accompanied by a minor child. And the demographics of that, families who are most likely to experience homelessness in our community, are families predominantly with younger children, though not exclusively. So 41% of the families have a child under the age of 4 years old. We have many households who are headed by very young parents who are considered transition age youth because they are 24 years of age or younger. And they're predominantly 75% are single family households. And in many of them, more than 80%, were living with family or friends before entering the homeless system. So whether they previously had a lease and then were evicted, and they often were staying with family and friends and ran out of places to stay, or for many of our very young parents, where they were staying once they had children, they could no longer be there, and they need a safe place to be while they transition into a permanent housing situation. What that means in terms of the breakdown of children in our homeless system, more than 40% are not yet school age, are infant and toddlers. We then have a distribution where about 48% are in elementary school age and 11% are middle school and high school age, to just give you a sense of the demographics of children in the school system. Now, the district is a little different than many other states and communities throughout the nation because we have a right to shelter law, and that has been in our books since 1984. What that means is any time that it is the temperature is at or forecasted to be freezing or below, and a family or individual presents as not having a safe place to stay, it is the legal obligation of the District of Columbia to provide a safe place to that individual or family. And we take care of that family and help them until they are able to transition to a permanent housing situation. Our law further says that regulates the conditions in which families with children are in a temporary environment, which means that they must be, which means that they must be in a private room, their own room. And there's further legislation that we have about other attributes of the space, but we don't put families in a congregate environment where they're, for example, in a rec center with many bunk beds and where there are many families. So there's so that we have it's a very specific right that families have, and we have a lot of families who come into our system. So if you think about the lack of affordable housing in the District of Columbia and the disparity of income that we have across our city, and when people don't have a safe place to stay, what it means for us as a community to be able to meet that need. We have expanded over time our emergency system to meet the needs of families, and we have families frequently coming into homelessness faster than we've been able to support them to exit, which was why we needed to come in and have a strategic plan that says, how are we going to create a system that actually works, that meets this growing need for emergency housing and permanent and affordable housing to really be able to serve families better. The way we ended up with DC General was because we needed a safe place to bring families in a winter, and it was intended to be a temporary solution, but we were never able to close it because of that growing and continuous need that families have. And we know that we need to do better. So at DC General, the council member already talked about it being inadequate in terms of conditions to be able to care for families in such a vulnerable place in their lives. So there are 270 units at DC General. At any given time, that means we have up to 1,000 people in that facility with around 400 children. Now, we have a lot of services on site and a lot of phenomenal partners at DC General, but that is a chaotic environment. And it is very difficult to provide the kind of intensive, person-centered services to support families on to that next place of housing in a way that makes sense for them in a facility that is so large. In addition, it has outlived its useful life as a building. That was probably a lot of reason why it was closed as a hospital many years ago. And we spend a lot of money just keeping the systems running and on maintenance and repairs to be able to even have it be a building that is safe to house people. And it is very difficult, very expensive. We need to do better by our families. I know many people agree with that sentiment, and that's a place in this room where likely there is a lot of common ground, even if you have many other questions about the strategy that we've put in front of the community about what next steps are. So I think it's important to understand, if we're going to replace DC General, what does that mean, and what is the plan that we've laid out? So we believe that every ward in the city has a role to play in this mission. We think that it is an all of community responsibility, that we as an entire community believe that it is the right thing to do. And so we have proposed an all 8 ward strategy. So what this slide shows you is where do we provide homeless services now before we enter into this plan. So I will tell you that you can see what the numbers are. I'm not going to read them. Well, many of you can, some of you can't. But I'll tell you that here in Ward 3, we provide 15 year-round beds for single individuals and 25 hypothermia beds for in the ward. That is the entirety of what Ward 3 provides in terms of in collaboration with the city for homeless services in terms of shelter beds in the District of Columbia. That is by far the lowest out of any other ward in the district. Next, within the month, we are opening a 230 bed shelter for women in Ward 2. So I know there have been some conversations about the degree to which there may be a saturation of services around the site that we have proposed in Ward 3, but really when you consider what is in Ward 3 compared to the rest of the District of Columbia, doesn't necessarily by the data that we have indicate a strong saturation here in the district when we have 1,000 beds, for example, in Ward 6. So if we're going to do better by our families and we're going to create a system that works and go from what is today admittedly a very broken system for serving families, it is not just about closing and replacing DC General. If that is all that we were doing, we would just be rearranging the deck chairs on a sinking ship. And so we have undertaken a very robust systems change around homeless services for families. Our goal around ending homelessness is that we make homelessness rare, we make it brief, and we make it non-recurring. If homelessness is going to be rare, that means that we need to prevent it more frequently. We need to offer prevention services where we are reaching families before they are at that point of crisis where they have no safe place to lay their children tonight. That oftentimes we are seeing that families may be coming in seeking help at school, from churches, in faith institutions, other community-based providers, and we've been missing opportunities to help them with their housing instability at the time things begin to happen for them. So we launched earlier this summer community-based prevention services where we have so far helped 900 families who came in seeking shelter services to stabilize in the community without a shelter stay. That is our most cost-effective intervention for families, and we are doing more and more of that all of the time. The next thing that we need to do is when families experience a crisis, we need to have a crisis response system that works. That means we need to get rid of a place like DC General and have small programs where we offer the intensity of services and supports, an environment where families feel like they matter, that it's not a throwaway place where they're being warehoused, where they are known by name, and they are on a path to permanent housing quickly. That is about how we make homelessness brief. We need to be investing in the housing solutions that work to end homelessness so families can exit shelter in a reasonable amount of time. That means investments in affordable housing, like the $100 million the mayor put in her first budget in the Housing Production Trust Fund and is promised to put in every single year while she is in office. It is investments in additional housing subsidies at the DC Housing Authority through the local rent supplement program, like the mayor has done in the past and like the president has proposed in his 17 budget toward family homelessness as well. And it is permanent supportive housing, so housing plus services for people who need not just the affordability but ongoing services to end their homelessness, and short to medium term help while families get back on their feet, like we do through the rapid rehousing program. We put $23 million in the mayor's first budget as a down payment toward these types of solutions as part of our strategic plan, and we'll continue to make investments in the system. So this is not just about shelter, not just about that short-term housing for families, but about how do we create a system where we can maintain what we do as a community and what we did in law, which is to say we're not going to turn families away when it's cold outside and cause them to have to sleep on buses or in a McDonald's, but we're going to have a safe place where they can come in, where they can be cared for, and return quickly to permanent housing in community with hopefully with the supports they need not to have a recurrence of homelessness. So that is the strategy that this is a part of. So what that means in terms of what happens on location, we need to have programs that, as we said, are small, that are in beautiful buildings that are not like a falling down, reused building that DC General is, that DC Village was before that, for those of you who have followed this issue for a while now, but that reflect that this is a place where people come in and feel that they've been invested in. They need to have the right kind of services, and they need to be in communities in a residential environment, and that is what we feel we have proposed to do through this strategy. So what does that mean? What are, people ask me all of the time, what are the services that you are going to have on site? The buildings only matter if they're run well, and I could not agree more with that. So we're talking about wraparound services, and to break that down, it means that we're assessing families for housing, what their housing needs are, whether they need just a little bit of short-term help or longer-term help with their housing, and connecting them with a service provider and with help with finding housing in the community to meet their permanent housing needs, and with their housing search. We are providing we will have social workers on staff, on site. We will partner, as we do now in all of our programs, to do early child development screenings and to make sure that we're providing appropriate early child interventions and access to early child care for parents so that they can advance on their employment goals. We will provide connections to job search and employment. I absolutely will. I will speed it up. I'm sorry. I'm trying to preempt some questions. Yeah. But I just ask you to. All right, folks. I hear that you're eager to move on to questions. I'm also asking you for this. Let's maintain this. And I heard you. Okay. And I will move quickly. So it's look, some people have and some people have not. Let's move to the next slide, Jay. We've had a lot of questions about factors in site selection. The things that we considered in doing that were that we needed to be able to, across 8 wards, identify 270 units. Each lot needed to have at least 30,000 square feet for building. We wanted to have access to services and transportation, and it needed to be an economically feasible deal that we could do within a 24 to 30 month development timeline so that we could be out of DC General in 2018. We looked at existing properties in the district's inventory first, and then we received bids through a solicitation, and we used brokers to identify additional sites in places that we did not have at first things coming in. So we have a path to be on to close. This is, as you are very familiar with, the site that we're proposing on Wisconsin Avenue at 2619 at Wisconsin and Edmonds. This is an image of a very preliminary drawing of what we think the outside would be like in terms of fitting with the community. And I'm gonna, Jay, why don't you go on? There have been some questions about the cost of the development of the deal, and for that I'm gonna turn the mic over to my colleague, Jonathan.
I'll talk very quickly. In terms of the structure of the transaction, let me first quickly start by saying The district leases properties to meet its uses all the time. So we do leases for office space, for things like DMV, all sorts of government uses. This would be a similar lease to what we've done in the past. The cost of developing this property, a developer came out, had to acquire the land. It includes the financing, the architectural. The building will be fully delivered with all of the furniture in it that we will be able to move in and operate immediately. It includes all the engineering and all the cost to construct. Right now, we envision preliminarily, based on what we've come up with, a total cost of about $14 million. That would include the acquisition of the land as well as the cost to develop and to deliver the building. What's included in the rent? So I know people have thrown out in a number of cases it seems very high per unit or the cost seems high, but to compare it to an apartment really is an apples and orange type of comparison because these are not typical units. Okay, the reason being is because this building is being delivered specifically to our needs. It includes program space, let me finish. It includes program space and other services that are part of this. It's not just we're delivering a residential units. There's program space and there's other amenities that are part of this building. It includes all of, can I finish? I'm glad to answer questions. Let me finish. Let me finish. We're glad to answer questions. That's why we're here today. It includes all of the maintenance and repair. So that means the developer is responsible for fully maintaining this building. We will get all new systems as part of this building. They will be required to fully maintain it over the life. They will require staffing, that's on-site staffing that will be there. It will include all of the janitorial work, all of the trash, everything included. From the exterior side, they're responsible for snow removal, landscaping, all of the exterior cleanup. It'll include unit turnover. As unit turns, the developer is responsible for providing the cleanup and the turnover over the units, and capital replacement. No different than if you think about your house or building. Over the life of that building, there is dollars that you continually need to put into the systems and upgrades that you need to make over time as those systems need to be replaced or work needs to be done. That's all part of the lease. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. So I was basically saying that in terms of the systems, over the life of the lease, the developer is responsible 100%. If any of the systems need to be replaced, he is responsible for that. If all the maintenance of it, all of the capital that needs to go into it, they are fully responsible for. So when you look at that cost, it includes a number of different things outside of just the normal rent for a unit.
I hear the eagerness for people to get their questions answered, so we will go to questions. Council member, is there anything that you want to say about logistics or before we go into questions?
Well, I do. Remember, if you want to ask questions, and you could start. Okay, but no one is to make a speech and monopolize the mic. That's the problem. Okay, wait now. And then in addition, as you're all thinking of your questions, I know that there are people outside. There's possibilities of stuffing more people in here. So let's wait 5 minutes and see if we can get some folks. Please, you know, it's not just about you. It's about them, too. Come on in.
So for people who have questions, the way that we're handling it is there are 2 microphones. There's Jay Melder has got one microphone right here. Other microphone is Marquez has over here. If you have a question, you will please raise your hand, and Jay and Marquez will alternate between questions. I'm going to just echo the council members ask. That we will get through more questions if we have less screaming out. And so whatever you are feeling, that's a fine thing to be feeling. But if you choose to vocalize it, it risks derailing the civility of the conversation I think we all hope to come here to have. So keep that in mind as you think about your reaction as people are talking.
question here.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Marie Louise Merville, and I was born in Washington, D.C. I'm also a mechanical engineer and a financial services expert, and I run a business. My question, who signs the paychecks for the people that run DC General today, and how is it okay to spend $22 million a year on Homless at DC General when it's on 67 acres? There's plenty of room today at DC General, 67 acres, metro accessible, on the river. You could have mobile housing that is safe with private bathrooms for each family today. Who is responsible for what the dilapidated, disgusting place that there is there today?
So DC General has on that campus, I'll remind folks that we have the jail, the meth clinic, an STD clinic, the psychiatric emergency services from the Department of Behavioral Health, and a building that we went into to meet the emergency needs of families. It is not good practice to create a homeless campus. Some communities have chosen to do that. LA has Skid Row. Some other communities have other large campuses where they put everybody who has no place to live in one place, and we feel that a better strategy is to provide services throughout the entire District of Columbia. Now, should the council block the proposal that we put forward and we're unable to move forward, that may be what we have to resort to, but I certainly hope not, because I don't think that's what we've heard from most of the voters of the District of Columbia. Now, in terms of who pays the paycheck, we contract for services on site with the community partnership. They write the checks to the staff. The issue is not the staff. The issue is the building. It is a district-owned building that has outlived its useful life. We do everything we possibly can to maintain it, but maintaining an outdated building is very expensive, not cost-effective or efficient. We think we can do better in new buildings that are spread out throughout the community, which is why we've put forward this proposal.
Who is it?
Next question.
Who is it?
Hi. My question is about the design of the facility. You'd mentioned that you want to give these families, you want them to feel safe and to have some dignity. And I agree. I think that is very important. These are going to be young mothers with young children, many of them many children. How do you design a shelter that has only 2 bathrooms with bathtubs? And the rest, yes, I looked at exactly the design of the building, 4 floors, there are shared bathrooms. So, the letter of intent, I'm sorry. So a mother with a sleeping baby and a 4-year-old is going to have to choose, do I leave the room and accompany my 4-year-old to the shared bathroom and leave my baby alone? Or, what do I do? To me, this is not safe, and I don't see the dignity there.
So I'd like to talk with you and clarify some questions about the design. We have a statute that the council passed about the design of the facilities and about minimum standards. That minimum is that some units, 1 in 10, will have their own private bathroom integrated, because some families need to have a bathroom within their suite. I'm sorry, some people may know the answer to this question, some people may not. I'm going to answer it in full. There are then family bathrooms that have a door that closes to the hallway and locks and has its own bathtub, toilet, and sink. We have a minimum number of a ratio of bathrooms that we said we would meet or exceed. In every single property that we are proposing, we are exceeding those minimums. In almost every single case, families will either have their own bathroom in their room, or one family bathroom will be shared by 2 families who have their own unit. They will be within sight of the actual room, so should a child want to go to the bathroom, and the parent can open the door, see their child walk in across the hall or next door to where they are and go into that. We care about the safety. We have thought through the safety in designs. We also have a place for security on every single floor where a security person has visibility over all of the comings and goings in the hallway. So yes, it will be safe, and yes, it will be dignified, and it is the right way to do this, because you also need to understand that this is temporary, and it is much better than we do today.
Okay. My question is about your choice of space. There's so many spaces in this area that have not been considered. There's the Holiday Inn down the street right now that is already built. It has enough rooms to hold people with individual bathrooms for them. Why have you not considered spaces such as the Holiday Inn or the Quality Inn on Connecticut Avenue? Why weren't those not looked at all? Because you're telling us you're choosing this space because this is the best space. As a neighborhood, we are all support helping the homeless. And we have a shelter not even a block away from there. So it's not that we're not doing our share. We have a shelter down that church. What we want to know is why you haven't considered spending all that money building when there's already built space available in DC.
So in order to identify sites in Ward 3 and all of the sites as part of this initiative, we went through a couple different avenues. We tried to identify what space was available within the district portfolio, and then from there, we put a solicitation out. We've gotten 6 responses in Ward 3, and we evaluated those sites. It's not to say that somebody can't say other addresses are available, but there's lots of reasons that just because we point to an address doesn't necessarily mean we'd be able to get that site under control and build a building. There are a lot of spaces that people have identified that are too small, that you couldn't come to an agreement with a landlord, that you couldn't make things work through a negotiation process. So I believe we have gone through a process that has vetted out what sites were available to us. We believe we've come up with a good transaction with the owner of or developer of this property who has a good relationship and has delivered things for the district before, and we believe this site is going to be a good site.
Hi, my name is Ron Del Sesto. I live in Ward 3 and in the neighborhood that you're proposing it. First, I'd just like to say, I think I speak for at least all my neighbors. We have a great deal of respect for what you're trying to accomplish, and we know it's difficult. But there are some legitimate questions. And I also think that we can all share the goal of wanting to end homelessness and also disagree with this particular plan. That doesn't mean that we disagree with the goal. It just means the plan might not be the right plan. And so I think that's important to understand. I think it's also, I just also want to echo what Councilmember Silverman said in the oversight hearing, which is it's also important to be realistic and truthful about what this is about and not be overambitious about what we're trying to accomplish. This does not increase the number of beds. This does not. This is just really a plan to move homeless from one site to another. It does not increase the amount of beds for the homeless population. That all said, when you say the cost is $22 million, $5 million more than DC General, that doesn't seem to include the wraparound services that have to now be put in 7 different places. It doesn't seem to be included in all the different spaces. The wraparound services now have to go to 7 different locations. I don't understand why Ward 2 is considered as part of the mayor's plan, because that's happening regardless of whether this gets passed or not. So it seems it's really only 7 wards that are contributing to this particular plan. But that all said, my question is on the process for what is the process now for bringing homeless into the DC General, and how do you envision the process when you have them spread out among 7 different wards? How is that process going to differ, and how is it going to be efficient, and how is it going to be cost effective? Yeah.
Okay. I'll quickly address a couple of I guess, concerns or questions about the plan. And I will say that we in no way say that we're creating more units than we have at DC General. We say we need to replace those units to have a strategy to close and replace DC General. The answer to ending homelessness for families in the District of Columbia is not more shelter beds. The answer is creating a system that works, that it's right sized to meet the emergency needs of families and to be able to move them out quickly. The more we prevent homelessness on the front end, the shorter the lengths of stay, the less number of units we need in order to be able to meet that emergency need that families have. And so that is why I spent a little time on the front end frustrating you all because I was answering your questions, yet to explain that this is part of a system change and that it only works if we do all of those things. And we have invested just as heavily in making sure that we are able to do all of those things successfully for this to work. The way that we make placements, to answer your specific and last question, in shelters that families come to the Virginia Williams Family Resource Center, which is our intake for all homeless services for families, and we assess whether they are eligible, whether things that we can do to help remediate their situation and keep them in the community where they are, and through a whole host of other resources. And if we can't and they need a place to stay, then it's through that resource center that we provide access and a placement in a short-term program. What we would do is we would assess the situation of families where their children are in school, what age their children's are, where they work, where they may have support systems in their lives, and do our best, and the size of their family, whether they need a reasonable accommodation, a whole host of things that we ask on the front end, and those are things that we consider when we make a placement and where we make that placement. And then from what is available across our inventory, we would make a placement for that family based on what they presented to us at intake.
Thank you for calling this meeting and for giving us the information. I'm an architect, an urban planner, and I teach about housing and cities. And I've done a lot of research, and I give advice to cities around the world, including Washington, D.C. and Paris, France, among them. And I can tell you from all the research that I've done, homeless shelter is not the solution to homelessness. In fact, no homeless person wants to be in a shelter. Homes are what homeless people want. And we, as a ward, should have some say in finding solutions to homelessness. I think that if you have mismanaged DC General and you admit to it that it's not managed very well, what guarantee do we have that any one of these these homeless shelters spread out will be managed any better? And I think that I will bring you a couple of cases where the DC government has made mistakes, and they were many, many of them. All of what we did with urban renewal was later considered to be a mistake, even though it was very well intentioned. But we do have some success stories. In Ward 3, 5201 Connecticut Avenue is a subsidized housing. I don't think many of you knew that. That's because it's very well maintained and people are placed there. What I would like to suggest that instead of shelters in 7 wards, why don't you make half these wards have permanent housing? We will welcome permanent housing. And we will welcome taking care of these families. If it's an R1 neighborhood, it should still retain its R1 zoning. That is really unfair that people have purchased properties in an R1 zoning, and just to meet your expediency, you're changing the zoning. I'm an urban planner. You don't do that for this kind of reason.
So let me start with, here's where I think we can all agree. The solution absolutely is housing, and which is why we're investing in affordable housing for families. But people who are experiencing homelessness and don't have a safe place to stay, they need a place to stay tonight. And that needs to be something better than we can offer at DC General, not because we've mismanaged DC General, but because DC General is too big. It's too big. Okay? It is too big. It's not about mismanaged. It's too big. We're making, and I'm going to tell you that I've been in my position as Director of Human Services for 1 year. I worked for the district during the Fenty administration when we closed DC Village. And we do learn from our mistakes because DC Village was big, it was expensive, and it didn't work well for families. And we said families belong in permanent housing, not in shelter. We worked hard to house every single family who was a long stay in our system and out of DC Village and provided them subsidies and access to housing in the community. And then the next winter, when we didn't have enough places for new families who are experiencing homelessness to go, we opened one floor at DC General because that was what we had to meet the emergency need. And now here we are again. So we know that if we are going to have something different and a system that works, it's got to have all parts. It's got to have a crisis response system that does include shelter, and it's got to have a lot more affordable housing.
Question here.
Hi, my name's Nick Friendly. I've lived in the district my entire life. I have a shelter right outside my back door that works very well because it's small and I know the people in it. And it's been there for 20 years and it's worked. A previous mayor came to us and wanted to put 50 beds into Guy Mason and hadn't bothered to do the research that she couldn't do that. I applaud you for the planning that you've done. I think you're making an effort. But as I read the letter of intent, it states that the city may at any time change the function of the building once it's built for any purpose that they so deem. And so if this building is built, what guarantee do we have that it won't be converted to a 200-bed homeless man facility?
Well, let me address, I think Laura can talk in terms of the change of use. However, let me address the language in the lease. In all of our leases, we have typical language in that says that we can use it for any lawful purpose. So it's not that we can get in and change it and use it for whatever we want. We have to comply with the zoning. No, it needs to comply with the current zoning. Now, in terms of changing the use, I don't think that DHS is interested in changing the use. The use is a consistent use that will be maintained at the property. It is being built out specifically to address that use.
Would you write it into the contract?
So we would, of course, be, and we made no secret that we would be requesting a variance for the zoning, and when Jonathan says we would have to follow that, we would follow what there is in terms of our intentions for the building. We're not looking to do a bait and switch. We know that we need this inventory for families. That is what we are proposing to do.
Hello. Hi, my name's Jason Geisinger. I've been living here in Glover Park now for about 5 years. Recently, specifically over the past winter or so, I don't know if anybody else seems to have observed this, but it seems that there's been an increase of panhandling right here just on Wisconsin Avenue. And where I'm going with this was one of these panhandlers about 3 weeks ago solicited me for a cup of coffee. I obliged. I got him a huge cup of piping hot coffee, which he then proceeded to, once I gave it to him, to throw it at me. So my question is, and we're all against fighting homelessness here. I don't think that's the question, but I know I don't feel like anything's being answered in terms of what's going to be done for the rest of us in the community, in terms of services like MPD, what is the plan for increasing the police and various other just civil services and civic services to make sure that I'm feeling safe to address any issues that may come up. So that's my question. I haven't heard anything about it or anything relating to how our own community and who's here now is going to be served.
So I'm not sure that I fully understand the specific question that you're asking. I'm the Human Services Director. So
You don't seem to be understanding too many questions that are being asked.
so is your question what are we going to increase police presence?
Increase police presence? What about security? Just for the
Okay, so security. and police presence. So we're talking about, let me see if I can, my intention is to be here to answer questions. I'm not trying to evade questions. Maybe I'm not specifically understanding, and we'll get there. I'm here to answer your questions. I'm not here to avoid them. If I was going to avoid them, I wouldn't have shown, okay? So, are we going to increase police presence? We will work with MPD the way we always do around police and security issues. Do we think, and is there any data to point to that high crime follows family shelter? No. Okay, there's not. So if you were to look at the data nationally, you look at the data throughout the District of Columbia, the fact that we provide homeless services to families in a residential setting absolutely is not correlated to increase in crime. Is it horrible that someone threw coffee in your face when you were trying to do something generous out of the goodness of your heart? Absolutely. Is that an MPD issue? Absolutely. And I hope you called 911, and I hope you got an adequate response. But I can't tell you that I can prevent those kinds of things. What I can tell you is this building will have 24-hour security. This building will have 24-hour staffing. It will have services, and we will know every single family, and we have policies around visitors to those families and how we operate. We agreed to come in and do through the ANCs and other with immediate neighbors, good neighbor agreements, where we talk about what are you worried about and how can we help? How will we operate in a way that we can be good neighbors with you, and we can build those conditions into our contract with the service provider and have accountability around that.
So we have this question.
Hi, my name is Maria O'Donnell. I'm co-president of the Stoddard Teacher and Parent Organization, and Stoddard Elementary would be the home school for the proposed homeless shelter. We have asked generally the question about how this would impact Stoddard, and we have been told that the students would be bused back to the schools in which they were originally attending. And quite honestly, I don't have a lot of faith in that, because if I was a family that was going to spend 3 months or more at a proposed shelter, and there was a school within walking distance that had better services than the one that my kids were at, and I had every legal right to send my child there, I would send it. I would send him or her. And right now in this room, you're seeing how crowded it is. This is what we have 4 times a day for lunch periods. We are absolutely bursting at the seams. And I think that the money that's being talked about is about the building, about the services, but nothing about the schools and the impact. We need an expansion. We need money for more teachers, and we need more money in the DCPS budget to accommodate this. So absolutely, someone from Stoddard should have a seat at the table right now to tell you some of the other impacts that are going to be happening, and that's just for your elementary school age children, not to mention all the families here that can't even get the services like childcare and aftercare because we don't have the services in this area. So I'm not sure how you're going to provide that to the families that are going to be in and out of the shelter. Thank you.
Sure. So our intention, of course, is to support families to do what is legally within their right. So let me tell you how that works. There is a federal law called McKinney-Vento that governs the educational rights of children. That says that children have a right to go to their home, the school where they were enrolled before they experienced homelessness, or to switch schools to the school that they're in bounds where they're staying while they're experiencing homelessness. That is their right. What happens today is that 4% of children switch to the school where they're closest to where they're receiving services while they're experiencing homelessness. There will be 38 units planned in this location. Based on the demographics of school-aged children, that means that approximately 10 children, it means that there will be approximately somewhere around 8 to 10 children who are elementary school aged at any given time. And if no, you're right.
So Laura,
so
let me,
look,
I remember the data.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I'll just take that question because I ran the data for Laura and I didn't give it. So with 4%, so at DC General, everybody thinks that elementary school kids go to Payne. That's not true. So 8 kids at DC General go to Payne. That's with 152 school-age children who are of age to go to Payne. So most families choose to keep their kids in the school that they've been in and have some stability, have relationship with teachers, are close to supports. For the 38 families who are here, that means that there's going to be roughly 10 to 15 elementary school age children, and even if we really bumped up to say that the services that families were going to choose for the short time to be here at Stoddard, that would work out to about 4 or 5 kids. What's that? They go to 55 schools across the district. No school in DC General, the last time we pulled the data, had more than 10 kids from DC General on their roster.
Okay, so thanks, Jay, for helping to fill in the data. I'd say the other thing is Stoddard wants to see at the table. Absolutely, we want to work with Stoddard. We will work with DCPS to plan for any increased enrollment that may happen from the creation of this, and that the enrollment is at the rate at which children at-risk rate. So that would mean that there would be resources related to that. Okay, and Marquez, and the woman behind you in the blonde's been raising her hand a lot.
Hi, thank you for coming today. My name is Anita Crabtree, and I live in the neighborhood and have a daughter and hopefully a son who will be attending Stoddard. I'd like to come back to the cost. The information that has been released is disturbing, incomplete, and so I'd like to get a more concrete details on the cost. We know that the letter of intent stipulates a $2.1 million lease with a 3% escalation clause year for year. And I note that in the RFP, the request for proposal, which was actually a solicitation for offers, it says that the price has to be competitive. The residents of that neighborhood know that that lot is owned by a group of heirs that has put it on the market for $4 million, and it has not been sold to a developer because that's not market. No developer has wanted to buy it because they know they can't develop it and make money off of it staying within the zoning, which is R1B. So it would seem that it's not a competitive price that lot is sold for. And we know that the current developer that you have this LOI with doesn't own it yet, that there's just a contingency contract in place because he doesn't want to buy it if this doesn't go through, right? So the cost is $2.1 million for rent with a 3% escalation. If that's a 20-year contract, we're looking at $56 million in rent to the developer. I note that the LOI also says that he will get his property taxes reimbursed by the city. Just a little perk thrown in there, I guess. And he's also developing Ward 4. So you talk about, Councilmember Cheh noted that the mayor has asked for procurement scrutiny to be removed from this. I'm interested to know how these developers got these contracts, these LOIs, the letters of intent, because they're not contracts. Anything can still change once this legislation is put through. So how did they get the contracts? We know that this guy, Ward 3 and Ward 4 developer, is a Bowser donator. So you would think that it would have to go through clean hand scrutiny. Why is that not happening? Jamal is a developer. I won't even talk about that. I don't know enough about it, but I heard he was supposed to be jailed months ago and that didn't happen. But how did these guys get these contracts? Why does the mayor want procurement scrutiny waived? And Laura Zeilinger just said that this problem isn't going anywhere. So why, after 20 years, will the city not have any homeless shelters when these leases are over? It's going to revert to the developers. It's going to be private property. The city will have spent hundreds of millions of dollars in rent and will not have any shelters. Is homelessness going to be gone in 20 years? I'd like to think so, but Virginia and Maryland don't have right to shelter laws, so people will wind up in DC. So why is the clean hands going to be waived? Why did these 5 guys get these leases for these 6 properties? We know that the Ward 2 shelter is already on the market to be flipped, so there's not going to be any landlord continuity. These are the questions we have, and this is why we think that this isn't a good plan. Thank you. Sorry, one more question about cost. We would like to know what exactly these wraparound services are estimated to cost. Because if you're spending, I don't know what the number is. Sorry, yes, but I would just like to know, that's the lease part, we would know what the total is going to be, because that's just the rent. You're going to have psychologists and sociologists and food and this and that. Okay, but then we'd like to know about the cost for the wraparound services so we actually have a total. Thank you for hearing.
Hello? Okay. So there was a lot of questions wrapped into that, so let me, no, that's okay. I appreciate that. So let me see if I can answer a couple of the questions. Number one, the way the developer was selected was, this was an open solicitation. Anybody could submit an offer. Each offer was evaluated on a case-by-case basis to figure out first if that site met the criteria in order to support the program. Was it large enough? Was it close to public transportation? If it met all those criteria, then it also had a pricing factor as well. When you look at the cost to acquire that site is in line with what other developers put in for cost to acquire other sites, not just in Ward 3, but other costs around the district. So I do think the pricing is in line with what we have seen for other submittals and what it took other people to acquire those properties. It did. So in terms of I think the pricing is in line. I think when you look at it, they are delivering a lot of services, and they are delivering us, again, a building specifically built out to our needs. There will be a clean hands in order to, there will be. So we will, prior to executing a lease, get a clean hands, which means they will have to have the necessary certifications. The reason we don't have clean hands at this point in time is only because in a lot of times, not just this transaction, but many transactions, developers are setting up partnerships or things aren't necessarily completely set up at the time when you first are in a negotiation with an LOI. LOI is basically just trying to establish a framework for the deal. So it is our intention to get a clean hands prior to executing the lease. And I will tell you, we don't have concerns right now. I've done a lot of leases with the district, and I will say nothing comes to mind immediately in a case where we were not able to execute a lease because somebody couldn't resolve an issue, whether it was a minor outstanding tax issue or a minor DOES issue. Most of those times, it's just a matter of somebody cleaning up in a minor administrative issue.
Did you have additional answers?
Huh?
Is the mayor is asking for the council to waive procurement laws. Has that ever happened before in the District of Columbia?
So I do not, so I don't know the answer to that. I don't know it in the past.
Why is the mayor asking for it in this case?
Okay, so I think there's an order of things that is confused as asking for an exemption from standard practices. What the mayor did in the legislation that's in front of council is she put all of the deals together to put forward as one package. So that because we want the entire strategy to be considered as a whole, not in one-offs. Every contract still has to go to council individually, and any council member, they will either go through passive approval, or any council member can file a disapproval resolution, and the council then could vote with a majority on any one deal to say that it can't go through. But this is just an initial approval of the LOIs that allows us to move forward with the next stage to getting from LOIs to leases and contracts. So in the end, we will go through every single safeguard in the process around clean hands and everything else that is part of the normal process. In terms of services, I don't have the exact price because we will procure new service contracts for every single facility. So we write requirements for these are the things that need to happen on site. DHS will issue, closer to the time the buildings are coming online, solicitations for each of the for each program separately, and we will then award contracts based on that. We have projections around those costs based on what we pay now that I can share with you and follow up. I don't have those numbers with me at this time, but I will tell you, and I have and we've been very upfront about all of our costs the entire time. Emergency shelter is the most expensive intervention in our system. It costs a lot of money to have all of the things on site that you listed. It is expensive, but there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. And we want to do it the right way, and we will invest the services and supports and in good buildings to serve families well. And we want to do it efficiently, and to do it efficiently and effective, we need to do it different. We will not get a different result if we keep doing the same thing we have always done.
I have a question over here.
It's time for the next question.
Question here, over here.
Thank you. My name is Marta Barrison, and I live in Glover Park, about 6 blocks from where the shelter is going to be built. We've owned our house there. We've owned a house in Glover Park about 6 blocks from where the shelter is going to be built. We bought it about 17 years ago, and our kids went to Stoddard, and they're now at Hardy and Ellington. And I just want to say that for most of my Glover Park neighbors, before I ask my question, they're very in support of having a shelter in our neighborhood. And I do think that many of they want to see this strategy go forward, the 8-ward strategy go forward. They want to see DC General closed. They know it can't close without an 8-ward strategy to replace the units. And they know then they don't want a homeless campus where children, small children, and most families do have small children, are living in the same place as a detox facility in the jail. It's just not safe for children to be there. I do think that some of the concerns people are raising are very legitimate, but I don't think that they go, for example, the issue with schools and the issues with bathrooms, I don't think they go to the site necessarily. And I'm just wondering, as far as process is concerned, whether there will be some process for working with the community around those kinds of issues moving forward, and what that process will look like.
So thanks, Marta. So we absolutely will have a process with the community around this. We will absolutely have a process with the community around the specifics. We're happy to work collaboratively with residents about what that process looks like. We're happy to have a community advisory board. We're happy to do it with the ANC. We are happy to figure out what is I think we just need to collaboratively figure out what is the right mechanism. But we want to have the school at the table. We want neighbors at the table, and we want to make this a program that that you as neighbors can feel proud of. So. You've asked your question, ma'am, and I know there are a lot of other people who haven't had a chance yet.
Hi, my name's Sheila Walker. I lived in the neighborhood a few blocks away from where the proposed site is with our 3 little guys. We're all here today. We now live nearby. I'm a behavioral geneticist at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, and we've also spent a fair amount of time at DC General, both just volunteering at the shelter and then with the children at the Homeless Children's Playtime Project. And my research all focuses on how stress, and particularly the chronic stress of poverty, can become toxic to the brain and the immune system, and what happens to children when they are in these circumstances that are so incredibly difficult. And I realize it's an incredibly complicated issue. There are many things that need to be ironed out that are very personal, They're finance issues and all kinds of incredibly complex issues. But I just want to commend the mayor and her team on proposing what we know from all the public health research is that it does take a system-wide level change to be able to think about moving the needle on homelessness so that it doesn't become this multi-generational basically dead end. And this is what it can be for many of these children and families. They need good schools, they need community support, and they do need wraparound services to have a shot of change and a hope for a better future, a healthy, happy, and productive future.
short question. Why many people don't trust what you are saying? First of all, on letter of intent. You're all saying that we will have 38 rooms. Is it correct?
Right now, the plans have. Right now, the plans are still being devised, so it is somewhere between 38 units. That may shift a little bit once the final plans are finished.
Okay, in letter of intent, condition of acceptability says 50 rooms with 2, 3, or 4 beds in each. You can look at the letter of intent at the end.
It does.
It
I
does.
agree.
So it's called bait and switch, just like you said you will not do.
No,
It's one. It's one. Let me finish another thing, and then I'll let it go. Second thing, you said that you had a process. It probably was a short one, because the companies that won that particular site registered November 26 or 27 of 2015, and you signed the letter of intent on January 8th, and I presume there was some negotiation in between. It seems like a pretty sweet deal to me.
So let me address both the questions. The first one is the letter of intent says approximately 50 units. I think it's important up to 50 units. So, but it's important a minimum of 50 units. So, and I thought it said approximately. Okay, so either way, keep in mind though that when this letter of intent is negotiated, you have no formal plans for the property. So the letter of intent is basically a document that at the point in time that we want to try to get control and work in agreement with the developer, we are putting what we believe to be the approximate number of units and the program at that point in time. It's not to say that it can change or won't change once you get further into the plans. In terms of the timing, the solicitation went on the market in September 2014. So this is a solicitation that has been open for anybody to submit properties or what they believe are potential opportunities. And when the original, in terms of this particular site, when it was submitted in November, each time something was submitted, we immediately evaluated on a case-by-case basis. And we were able to, once that was submitted, within a few months, work through with the developers what the final transaction was going to look like. So it's not a very quick period of time. It is typical for what we find in terms of getting something under a letter of intent.
I would just
Hello?
say the other thing that is probably helpful we know that the initial work that we've done indicates that we can accommodate 38 units on that site. It's not a huge lot, and that is what we expect. If in the design phase with the developer, we can serve a couple of more families and do it well, that is part of the negotiations that we have in terms of maximizing the efficiency and the effectiveness of what it is that we're doing. We believe that it's likely to be 38. It's not intended to be a bait and switch. In law, we're not exceeding, I think it's in the legislation that we're not exceeding 50 at any particular site. We're serving less families now and will, even after all of these are built, in Ward 3 than in any other place in the District of Columbia.
Laura, my name is Ann Schneiders, and I'm a social worker and an attorney who's worked with children and families in the district for the past 30-some years. I'm not opposed to some kind of subsidized housing for children and families, but shelter isn't the answer. Shelter is temporary. Shelter puts children in schools and removes them from schools and moves them to another, and eventually you have a homeless young adult in that system. Secondly, the number of children and families at DC General that have been raised by DC government in the foster care system is astounding. And the government has done a very poor job of removing children from their own homes, putting them in foster care for 15, sometimes 21 years, and then they emancipate from foster care to homelessness. And if the government can't use that time to prepare these children for some type of independent living, I don't see how, after 21 years or 15 years or whatever they've spent in foster care, and I have 3 young women in that DC General Shelter right now who've spent all of their childhood in foster care and have no means of becoming independent at all. So I question the district's ability to now take these children after that period of time and move them into another temporary situation. Foster care is temporary. The DC General Shelter is temporary. You're moving them to another temporary shelter. There is no sense of permanence or investment of these young people in the place where they're living. And I don't understand why, first of all, the government doesn't do something about foster care. And secondly, why the vast amount of money that is being spent on this type of temporary arrangement where children are going to bounce around from health facility to school to daycare to whatever, why that money isn't put into subsidizing housing or some form of more permanent housing for these young women who desperately want to raise their own children. But in these types of situations, CPS moves in very quickly. And as somebody mentioned, you leave one child in the apartment while you bathe the other one, somebody's going to call CPS and that child will end up in foster care. So it's a vicious cycle for these. I've spent days sitting in the Virginia Williams Center with young women who can't get approved for housing, or other single women who say, Ms. Schneiders, you told me not to get pregnant and I didn't, and now only those young women who have babies have even a shelter to go to. So there's something radically wrong with the basic premise of how these young families are being cared for, and I do not think that this type of a shelter is the answer to that.
Okay, so to address, I think there are more things that you and I agree on than you might think. So access to affordable housing is absolutely the answer. There's no question. And if I could only invest in housing and have a system that worked, I would do that. But I've got to have a place that when a family doesn't have a safe place to lay their child tonight, they can come. And I need that place to be something better than DC General. We do not want them to live there and have the length of stay that we have at DC General. And we certainly need to support our young people who are in foster care to exit foster care to permanency, not to homelessness. And we have a broken system that needs fixing in a lot of ways today. And this is part of what it's going to mean to fix a broken system. So we are not going to move families, and I just want to be clear about something because this may sound confusing. We're not moving families from DC General to these locations. We're moving families who are experiencing homelessness today to permanent housing every single day. Families exit our shelter system to permanent housing in the community every day, okay? In the month of February, 160 families exited homelessness to permanent housing in the community. Unfortunately, more families than that entered homelessness in that same month. So we've got to do better at the prevention and early interventions. We've got to help families and young people who are in foster care transition better to permanency out of that. All of those things matter. But we aren't going to, if we keep doing the same thing, we aren't going to fix a broken system. And keeping DC General as the emergency shelter for families is not working, and it is not the solution. So the group of families that's in DC General today is not the group of families that was there last month, is not the same identical group of people that will be there next month. But and so this is about building a system for the future that as families experience homelessness, there's a place they can come briefly with access to supports. Many of them keep their kids in home schools, so they aren't jumping around from school to school. The majority of them do, and that that we can support them back and connect them to the affordable housing resources that they need in the community. But this is one part of fixing what is very wrong with our social service system and our homeless system today.
I hope before you leave, am I next? I hope before you leave, over here. I hope before you leave you'll answer that gentleman's question about why a program that's turning over so much money to a group of developers, all of whom contributed to the mayor's campaign, is being exempted from the normal procurement process. My question is a little different. It goes to the sharing responsibility point. The neighborhood in which you're proposed to site this facility, Massachusetts Avenue Heights, is a fairly well-defined neighborhood. It's hard to define a neighborhood, but there's a 4-lane avenue on one side, there's a 4-lane avenue on the other side, and the other side is all government property. So it's a fairly well-defined neighborhood. It's zoned single family. There's about 140 families living there. And I noticed on your slide that you say Ward 3 is only housing 25 hypothermia beds and 15 permanent beds. Well, I'm not sure which facilities you were talking about, but all of those hypothermia beds are already in that neighborhood, and half of those permanent beds are already in that neighborhood. All right? It's hard to know exactly how many people will end up in your facility because of some of the doubts that have been raised here, but taking your word at how many people will be there, when that facility and all the other facilities are full, sheltered homeless people will constitute about 40% of the population of that neighborhood. And my question to you is, how does that fit in with the notion of sharing responsibility?
So I don't know how to say this I don't know. A lot of developers contribute to a lot of campaigns, okay? So what I know is we had a process, and we needed to identify sites in 8 wards to get to the goal of closing DC General. And we considered every deal. We did not exclude an offer because somebody made a contribution to a campaign. That I don't think anybody who was looking at those deals knew who contributed to what. But I'll tell you that I will tell you that we wouldn't rule in or rule out any proposal, and we've been transparent about every proposal that came in and released the list of every single proposal that came into us as part of the process. Every contract will go to council and will have to meet clean hands and every other safeguard in the process. It just doesn't happen in the LOI stage, okay? So there is no intent to evade any of the protections or to do and make any sweetheart deals with any particular developer. And you can believe that or not believe that, or tell me what you think that. Give me a counter proposal, because we have a strategy to close DC General, and we spent more than a year identifying a strategy to do that in 8 wards. And I know how hard we looked, and I know every single site that we looked at in doing it and what came in and what didn't. And guess what? The Best Western didn't offer us their building, okay? So nor did the Holiday Inn. The other, so in any case, then I think your other question was about what you perceive to be a saturation in your neighborhood. So there are 6 beds that St. Luke's Church. 7 beds that St. Luke's offers. 7. You can draw a circle, I think, around any building and count the residents around it and do your own math. There's also a multi-unit apartment building across the street. So
There are other parts of Tenleytown. There were 2 zones there. Can you talk about that? There's 2 zones in Tenleytown that were on the list.
So we put in bids for both of those, and they were rejected.
I'll answer. So let me answer this woman's question. So we put in, it was part of an open, call it bid, that was run through a brokerage firm, and there was a firm that came in. There were multiple buildings that were put on the market. We did not need all the buildings, and all the buildings didn't meet our needs. And then there was a developer that came in and acquired all 3 buildings at a higher price. That's why the property, I think you're referring to Brandywine, that's why the property didn't come to fruition.
Excuse me. Hi, I'm Jennifer Knox, and I think that it's my turn to speak.
Yes, but, so I answer final question on this. Yes, the property was higher, but you got to remember, they included existing buildings. There were tenants in those buildings, so you would expect those properties to be higher.
Thank you. I'm Jennifer Knox. I'm with the Washington Interfaith Network. I'm the lead organizer and executive director there. We work with 35 congregations across the city, including in this area, Metropolitan Memorial, UMC, including St. Luke's, Chevy Chase Presbyterian, Temple Sinai. There are a number of members here today. And WIN as an organization has been working on this issue since 2013. We've had many leaders spend a lot of time out at DC General getting to know families, being involved with the Children's Playtime Project, trying to understand what were the challenges that were going on there, how could we make that place as decent as possible for a short period of time so that families could live more, dignified than they were living. But ultimately, since 2013, we have been really pressing that DC General needed to be closed down as a facility, that it was too old, and that it was not equitable to house all of these families in one ward without access to a lot of resources. And as many people have said, on the same, property as a jail, a morgue, a methadone clinic, et cetera. And so, we want to say that we have pressed that this administration address this issue in their first term. And, I think we appreciate that this is a very challenging task, and we appreciate the thought that has gone into this proposal. And WIN will be having over 100 members out supporting and saying, yes, we want this proposal to pass. We don't consider that an end. We consider it a beginning, because our communities do have to really stay engaged and make sure that these short-term family housing facilities, other people have had plenty of time. I am going to finish my question. So we will be pressing to really make sure that these short-term family facilities are well managed, that they work well for the homeless families in them and the neighbors that live there. And so my questions are, how specifically are you going to work to decrease the times that people stay in these short-term family housing? Because 90 days is a lot different than what's happening. And we would like to have your thoughts on how you're going to decrease those times. Secondly, I think it is a good question. 20 years from now, how many short-term family housing units are we going to need, and are we going to have enough to make sure that we are making sure that when families experience homelessness, hopefully that is rare, brief, and non-recurring, but they do have some place that is safe, secure to access counseling to start their lives over. And lastly, DC, we know, is one of the most inequitable cities in this country, and that a huge part of this strategy, this cannot be successful unless we are both passing this proposal, but also investing in affordable housing. $100 million, is a lot that was approved in the last budget, but I am curious and I think concerned, how many affordable housing units do we need to really make sure that we are fixing this system? And how do we go about learning that so that we can, as supporters and advocates of decreasing the amount of displacement that's happening in our city, make sure that people have short-term family housing, but also long-term affordable housing? Thank you.
So to reduce the length of time, we need to make this whole thing work. We need to invest in the housing solutions that families need. We're doing the actions that we're taking now to do that. So we're doing a lot of work to revamp our rapid rehousing program, which is the main program that we support families with to exit shelter in the first place. And I don't think that this crowd has a lot of patience for the detail about the fixes we're making for that program, but I'm happy to offer more to that for people who are interested. And of course, investing in the affordable housing and the prevention that is needed, as well as the preservation of affordable housing. There is a much larger affordable housing strategy than just the solutions that the ones that are specifically targeted to the homeless program, but we have targeted vouchers for families who have exited housing or who are in permanent supportive housing who don't need the level of services. So there's a tremendous amount of investment in the affordable housing side. But this city has neglected for decades to invest in the affordable housing that people need, and we're not going to dig out of it overnight, which is why that this is not solved in 1 year, and it's not going to be solved in 2, and we're investing in the entirety of the system. The things that we're doing to reduce length of time are improving the housing navigation services and improving the supply of programs and access to affordability that support families to exit homelessness. And yes, the mayor will continue to invest in affordable housing. We know that there are more than 70,000 families in the District of Columbia who are severely rent burdened, and we have, and if we could afford to provide affordability for every single one of those families, we probably wouldn't need the size of shelter system that we have today. But if that's something the council is able to do, I would encourage the council to invest in the affordable housing that is needed, and figure out a way to raise the revenue in order to do that. I'm not sure if I fully answered, but I do really appreciate the role that WIN has played and our faith partners in opening up the houses of faith, which is where all of the homeless programs that we have currently in the District of Columbia are housed within, Ward 3, in this neighborhood, are housed in communities of faith, which have decided, based on their missions, that they have wanted to offer those services to people who are experiencing homelessness. The fact that they've done it in one place has been because of their initiative and their mission to do that, not because I asked them that they should only open in that one location.
Hi, Wolfgang here.
Oh,
Hi, Laura. Most people are actually concerned about the total number of people and the density and the impact on the density compared to the surrounding area. I haven't heard that there's any regulation, statute, or guidance by the council that provides rules for that. What is the maximum density per square foot in temporary shelters? What is the maximum total housing of people compared to the neighboring 3 blocks? Do we double the population of the next 3 blocks, or do we triple it? I think there's the insecurities coming here and the switch and bait accusations and all these things are based that there's no rules on this. And I think that should be established first before moving from a centralized system to a decentralized system, to establish the same rules across the city, and to make the units fit into the neighborhoods. It might reduce this lot size or this location to fewer shelter places, but it would, I think, help the neighborhood to be at ease, that it wouldn't change the character, because that's what changes the character if there's a sudden huge influx that cannot be absorbed. And I'm just surprised there's no regulation or statute on it, and I think that's something that would make a lot of people at ease.
So Matt is truly our zoning expert, and I may ask him to come up for a second. But I do think, in general, to answer your question, there is a framework in place that we have to meet. So this is not because we're going through legislation, doesn't mean that we're ignoring the existing zoning. What we're looking for relief on is on a use basis, but the building will meet the requirements of the existing zoning there, which has restrictions in terms of setbacks, how tall you can build the building. All of those things will still be in place.
I didn't mean that. I mean, if we have a certain square footage for a building of a certain lot size, that is given in the zoning. What is not given is how many people are allowed per 10 square feet. That's what I'm talking about, because that determines the total number of people. We know that hotel rooms have to have a certain size per occupation. We have certification of occupation for restaurants, for business. what is the certification for
Okay.
occupation for temporary shelters? Because that determines ultimately how many there would be definitely at the zone. If there's no certificate of occupation for shelters at the time being, then we're creating a situation where people can change the plans, and that makes everybody here at unease.
Okay, so again, I'm Matt LeGrand, DCRA, zoning administrator. The questions, there's a couple pieces of this that I'll try to speak to is as to the number of people that can be safely accommodated within a building. That is not the purview of zoning, but that's the purview of the district's construction code. And there's a construction code, there's a housing code. Okay, there's any design that is ultimately approved and it would have to secure a building permit, would have to go through a review at DCRA to ensure that all building code and housing code requirements are met. So can that space accommodate the number of individuals? And the district cannot approve something that does not meet the building code requirements. Okay, so I'm not a building code guy, I'm a zoning guy. So as was noted at the beginning of the meeting and mentioned, because of the particular zone, the R1B zone, the site is zoned, in order to utilize that site for the proposed use would require the Board of Zoning Adjustment to consider what's called a use variance. The Board of Zoning Adjustment must hold a public hearing. That is to, the purpose of that hearing is to help inform them as to, is that a relief, it's generally called relief, can they approve that relief in context of that particular location? For any matter that goes before the Board of Zoning Adjustment, it's a case-by-case situation where the board has to their satisfaction, decide whether the criteria for the relief can be met. And that's the point that the zoning is up to the BZA, in which again, the public hearing that they will have to hold would have to consider.
Hi. Hi. Yeah.
Questions over here?
Yeah. Actually, I come from Ward 6. Nice to meet you. Anyway, thank you for your time. And then I really understand this homeless problem is everybody for challenge. And then, to be honest, if mayor and DC government transparency and then be honest, start to talk to the people, might be people trying to help the government. That's what I understanding. And then you mentioned the high crime rate. Okay, Ward 6, we already carry 3 public housing. You mentioned that, and then past, we already carry the homeless shelter. We saw that naked people in the street, and then they gotta pee in the playground. Should we, every time we saw that situation, should we call the police? It's not fair for the resident or for them. So also, I don't trust at all government really manage well the public housing or homeless shelter. Because why? If you guys want to see how horribly managed, you come to here, a waterfront area, to see how to manage the public house. Really horrible. So I don't trust it, even though the government trying to say we try to perfectly trying to help the manage well. I cannot see really the real fact. And even couple weeks ago, to be honest, in front of our resident area, their public house, they have a gunshot. 2 years old baby got a shot. So we saw that, really feel scared. And once I get the information, I visited all Ward 8. Sorry. I meet all the people, kind of nearby people, the potential homeless area, the shelter area, except the 3 wards, Ward 3, Ward 6. Other ward is not really the safety area, kind of rural area, not really the residence area. Government to say, we trying to look for the spot friendly, family-oriented area, but except 3 wards, other ward is not at all. Have we visit there, other ward, visit there. It's not friendly area. So I trying to add, my question is this, how can you guarantee it is safe for the homeless people, also for the resident? How could you guarantee? Because from my experience, I cannot believe. All right.
So If your question is, what are we doing to make these programs safe for the families, safe for the community around the families? First of all, they're a lot smaller than the size programs that we have. We are creating an environment that I think promotes a sense of worth, dignity, and with that comes better outcomes. And we see that when we invest in beautiful facilities, that people feel and act better in them than what happens in our facilities that are most run down. We will have adequate security on site. That means security at the front door, controlling who comes in and out. We have rules around people's supervision of their children so that their children are safe. And we have security on the floors where we're able to make sure that only people who should be where they're supposed to be around it and are there. Now, do we have crime issues in our city at large? Of course that we do, and those are MPD issues, those are law enforcement issues. All of these things are important, and all of these things need solved. My responsibility is over the human service programs, which includes the operation of our homeless programs. And I know that we have a lot of work to do across our system, and that we have programs like DC General and like some of our very big facilities that are not in line with our values and how we know are the best ways to offer services. That is why I am here in front of you saying we need to do something different, and if we're gonna do something different, we have to find places where we can do it smaller. Okay, and so that is the nature of this proposal. That is why I'm here. We know that that the system needs fixing, and this is part of what it takes to do it.
Hi, my name's Marilyn. I'm not a genetic behavioralist or a lawyer or an international urban planner. Couldn't even play one on TV. But I do live in the area. And what I'm seeing here is the complexity of it. So if you'll bear with me, I'd like to unravel the hairball a bit and focus on one issue, 1.5 issues, and that is the cost and process. Hey, Matt. How about we form an LLC in the neighborhood and submit a competitive proposal, and then we in the neighborhood negotiate the terms as well as benefit from the financials that appear to be ongoing and at the other end. I'm real serious.
A lot of people. So go for it. I mean, a lot of people don't like what we've proposed, but give us something that's better.
All right.
Hi, my name is Henrik Ivazin. I live in the neighborhood. We manage a 40-unit condominium building, and I have 2 questions. I'm going to say it very fast because we're running out of time. One is, if you do a very simple calculation, $2.1 million per year just for the lease of that building translates to $4,600 per unit of essentially dormitories with outside bathrooms. And that's not even considering the cost of operation, the snow removal, security, social services, none of that. That is, how can that be compared to typical rental in this neighborhood? You can rent a 4-bedroom luxury apartment with 3.5 bathrooms, three full bathrooms. You know the drill. For $3,500 or $4,000 a month. That is not. It's just to put that in perspective. Point 1. Point 2 is for actually Councilmember Mary Cheh. How can the council even consider voting on this proposal without doing the due diligence and without even knowing what the site selection process was? Because the mayor is adamantly hiding that from the public. She is not disclosing it. And to my knowledge, no one on the council actually knows about it either. It's just they're just as much in the dark as we are about it.
there have been a number of things that made reference to the council. So I want to say a couple of things in response, although, I wanted to set this up for the executive branch. First of all, the mayor sent over the legislation. As I told you, it has three aspects to it. One is the approval of the letter of intent and a whole package. The other is at least perhaps the framework now. It might not be that later, but it does give exemption from contracting and procurement. And then it does ask us for our sense of the council approval of expediting the zoning and also saying that we support it. Let me tell you where I am on this. First of all, we should never get involved in that zoning issue. It's up to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. You all are entitled to your full opportunity to go before the board and to talk to your ANCs, and they can approve, they can disapprove, or they can approve with conditions. So there's a lot of opportunity there, and I don't think the council should enter into that. As far as the business about the contracting and procurement, I have already sent a letter. I have not yet gotten a response, but some while now, saying that I don't understand why we have to forego any of that, and I'd like to have clarification and tell me what your problem is and why we need to, any part of that. I actually put, I'll make some, point here. I actually put a lot of that in the law when I had that under my jurisdiction, when I had that part of the council business. And then in terms of the letters of intent, I have gone back to the mayor. I have even asked, as you know, at a hearing, when somebody says 38, I am a lawyer. I want to see 38. I don't want to see anything else. In fact, I've asked for fewer units than 38. I've asked why we can't have 2 of smaller units. I don't, wait. I'm not sure if I can get that latter part going, because the whole thing does go to the council, but I will insist on 38, okay? Now, how does this actually work when it comes to the council? When we have that hearing on the 17th, that's the time, and we have all been digging into the particulars. That's the time when we're going to hear about that and going to hear from you and going to hear from the people involved and start to make some decisions. I have to tell you, though, about the way the council works with respect to contracts. If a contract comes over and we don't like it, the way we deal with contracts is, under the Home Rule Act, the way we proceed, we vote it up or down. We can't go in and say we don't like Section 2.8 and change that. So in terms of this particular spot and this particular contract, if it comes before the council and it still doesn't have the features that I want, then I will vote against it. But I have to vote against the whole thing or begin negotiations with the mayor and say, look, I don't like this. You have to take it back and resubmit it with these pieces in it. The council is a collective body. It's 13 people. So I would also have to get 6 other people to agree with me that that's how we should approach it. I'm going to do my level best to get that. For example, on the 38 point, I'm not talking about up to a minimum of or any, I don't want to see any of that. Just 38. You said 38, and I've checked with the mayor on multiple occasions about 38. And she says 38. So that's the way that works. I want you to understand that. So that's where we are. And I do support the closing of DC General. I definitely support the idea that across 8 wards, and I think we can find proposals that are acceptable. But I want you to understand what role the council plays, and in this particular case, the kinds of things that, my position on them. So. There you go. No, you're out of turn. The question's here. The man.
Appreciate it. These will actually be pretty quick. So, am I hearing you right that you mentioned that you did an RFP process, and then after that, you went to brokers in order to select sites?
We did an RFP process. Brokers was just another way for it to identify. But even if a broker had identified a property, they were still required to submit through the RFP. It was just another way for us to better canvass the market.
Okay. And with respect to this site in particular, was that brought to you by a broker, then went through the RFP process?
This site was not, no.
Okay. Another quick question here for you. with respect to, or no, here, forget it, we'll talk about education because I wanted to ask you this question. What percentage of current DC General students attend public school in Ward 3 or even Ward 2? I'm just wondering on a ward-by-ward basis as it relates in particular to commutes as they want to go back and forth. So if you're at this facility and let's say you want to go to Plummer Elementary, obviously that is a 90-minute commute, either way, which seems a bit something I'm sure parents would not want to put their kids under the supervision of a contractor on a bus for an hour and a half a day.
Is that the question you want to answer, the education stuff? So I can send you the schools in Ward 3 that DC General does. The Department of Education also tracks this statistic, and 94% of all district schools, including DCPS and charter schools, have students who are experiencing homelessness, whether or not they're in our shelter programs, transitional housing, or what education has a broader definition that they're doubled up. 94% of all schools have that. I can get some specifics to you afterwards, but again, it's governed by the McKinney-Vento Act, 1987. It's federal law. Families of students who are experiencing homelessness can either choose to go to their school of origin or to their homebound school, and the federal government is responsible for paying for that transportation back.
So we're running up on the time that we have for this. We have time for, I think one, if perhaps two quick questions, and then we, if you have additional questions after that, we can take down questions, but you can submit them to the dmhhs.dc.gov web email address for answers as well.
Hi, I'm a teacher. I live down the street. And I think you've been getting a lot of questions from people who are in their taxpayer mode. Pardon?
Use your mic.
I think there have been a lot of questions like this, a lot of questions from people thinking in a taxpayer mode. And then there's a quick reference to the citizen way of thinking of I do want to end homelessness. And I think that if your taxpayer thought process kind of overwhelms things, it seems like that citizenship role of taking care of each other. It's like the thing about Donald Trump, whether or not he's pretending to be a racist or if he is a racist, in the end, it doesn't matter. It's So I think my question is not for you guys. My question is for us, Glover Park, and you are starting to answer this, is what are we gonna do? How are, our government can do one thing, but what are we gonna do about homelessness? And what are we gonna do? Our faith-based communities are doing something, but I would like to be known for living in an activist neighborhood that does things and to take care of the people of the city that, don't look just like us.
All right, final question.
I don't disagree on that point. I guess that's why my question is, for the leases 1 through 6, at least according to the LOIs, they end in 15, 20, 25 years. And DC General was a temporary solution. The other solution was temporary solution. Why should we trust this temporary solution?
So I'll let Jonathan speak to lease terms, but leases always have an end to them, and that is the mechanism that we have in our budget that allows us to acquire or lease the requisite number of sites that we need to accomplish our goal to close DC General. Of course, as we reach the conclusion of a lease, we have the option to work to renegotiate a new lease with additional terms. That also happens all of the time. It's just the nature of it's my understanding that it's just the nature of how property deals get done. So should we, at the end of the life of the lease, continue to need it for this use, that would be something that we would work with, or the district at that time will work through our DGS to negotiate on our behalf. Is there anything you would add to that?
No, I think that's exactly right. The initial term of this lease is 15 years, and then there's one 5-year option period, and that's meant to go through the initial term. If we need to stay for an additional period of time, we have the ability to do that. And exactly to Laura's point, there are a number of leases that we have with the district that we may want to extend beyond the lease expiration, and that's a discussion that we have with the landlord if that's the case at that point in time.
Okay, folks, I want to thank people for coming out today. This is a beginning of again, beginning of a discussion. We will continue to make space to answer questions that you have, and appreciate the dialogue.